You don't expect your world to shatter over a simple note left on the kitchen table. But when my husband ran away with my daughter, that's exactly what happened. What I discovered next changed everything. My name is Marla Henley. I was 59 when it happened, a mother, a wife, a retired schoolteacher. And for a long time I believed my life had meaning, until the two people I loved most vanished without a word. My husband, Derek, was supposed to take our daughter, Lila, to her dental appointment that morning. It was a routine thing. She'd just turned 22, still in between jobs, still figuring herself out. I didn't think twice about it. I even reminded him to take her favorite peppermint gum, something small and stupid that mothers remember. But when I came home that afternoon, the house was quiet. Not peaceful, eerie. Lila's room was empty. Drawers pulled out. Clothes gone. So was Derek's suitcase. The one we used for anniversaries. I thought maybe an emergency, a car breakdown, a sudden detour. I called. Texted. Nothing. An hour passed. Then 5. Then night fell and my stomach began to tighten in that way you only feel when something is deeply, grotesquely wrong. It was the note that ended the illusion. Scrawled on the back of a shopping list in Lila's looping, childlike handwriting. Don't look for us. We're happy. We deserve this. We. Us. The words didn't make sense. Not until I found the second note, Derek's. Just 3 lines. I'm sorry, Marla. I never meant to hurt you. But I can't pretend anymore. She makes me feel alive. I stared at the paper so long I forgot how to breathe. My daughter. My husband. Gone. Together. In love. The word hit my brain like a car crash. No, not possible. Lila was my child. Derek had helped raise her since she was 8. He used to braid her hair. Tuck her in. He said she was like his own. I stood in the middle of the hallway, holding both notes, heart galloping in my chest, bile rising in my throat. I remember dropping them to the floor, walking to the sink, and vomiting until I saw stars. They'd been planning it, clearly. The suitcases. The bank withdrawals. The way Derek had stopped touching me in bed months ago, blaming his back, his stress, the weather. The way Lila had started dressing up more, staying out later, wearing perfume I didn't recognize. I had chalked it up to youth. Hormones. Change. Never once did I imagine them. I wish I could tell you I screamed, or that I broke every plate in the house. But I didn't. I just stood there, arms limp, head spinning. I couldn't even cry. Grief hadn't reached me yet. I was still trapped in disbelief. The police weren't much help. They're both adults, they said. No signs of foul play. Foul play? There was nothing more foul than what they had done. But betrayal isn't illegal. It's just silent. Soul-breaking. My friend stopped calling. My sister said maybe I'd been too controlling. And the whispers in town, God, the whispers. Some people pitied me. Others judged. But no one truly knew the hell of finding out that your own daughter had stolen the man you shared a bed with. The man you once trusted with your deepest fears, your rawest parts. But I know something they don't. Something neither Derek nor Lila had counted on. I'm not the weak woman they left behind. I'm the storm they just unleashed. They thought I'd crumble. But I have something they forgot, years of secrets, passwords, and leverage. And one by one, I will use every piece of it. Not just to ruin them. But to remind them, you don't steal a mother's trust and walk away untouched. If this story gripped your heart, hit like, share with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe my channel. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the center of our marital bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me like a slow, mocking clock. Each blade slicing through the silence felt like a reminder, He's gone. She's gone. Together. I should have burned the sheets, torn down the photos, but instead I just stared, because something in me refused to move until I understood. Around 3 a.m., I got up and opened his dresser drawer. It still smelled like his aftershave. Cedar and spice, the scent I once loved, now nauseated me. At the very back, behind a stack of balled-up socks, I found it. His wedding ring. Derek had removed it. Left it behind like an afterthought. But that wasn't the worst part. No. The worst part was the folded photo tucked beneath it, a picture of him and Lila at the lake last summer, both laughing, her head resting on his shoulder in a way that now made my stomach turn. And on the back, in Derek's unmistakable handwriting, "You make me feel young again." I remember my hands trembling as I sank to the floor. Not from sadness anymore, but fury. They didn't just run away. They had loved each other under my nose. Planned their escape while I poured their coffee. While I drove Lila to therapy and stood by Derek during his hernia surgery. All while I thought I was building a life with people who loved me. How long had this been going on? How many birthdays, how many dinners, how many family movie nights were just a lie wrapped in routine? I began digging. The next morning, I accessed our joint email. He'd forgotten I knew his password. It was Lila's birthdate. The irony made me sick. Inside the inbox was a separate folder, innocently labeled tax papers. But it wasn't tax papers. It was a graveyard of messages, months of back and forth notes between them. Coded, but not careful enough. Things like, "I miss your touch," and "Don't worry, she'll never see it coming." One email was dated the same week I was in the hospital recovering from my gallbladder surgery. Lila had brought me flowers. Derek had fed me soup. And then they'd gone home and written each other love notes while I slept through the pain. I wanted to smash the computer. But I didn't. Because now I had evidence. Proof. And that was far more powerful than rage. I printed every message, every photo attachment, every whisper they thought they'd hidden. I created a folder, red, thick, labeled truth. And I began building my plan. I didn't know exactly how I would do it yet, but one thing was certain, they wouldn't get to live their fantasy life untouched. Derek and Lila didn't just betray me. They erased me. And I was going to make sure the world saw them for what they really were. The next step was finding out where they went. They'd wiped their tracks clean, no credit card use, no calls from known numbers. But Derek was arrogant. He always left a trail, even when he thought he was clever. I visited the bank. Played the grieving wife. The kind woman at the counter told me he'd made 2 large cash withdrawals over the past month, both at a branch outside of town, one I'd never known he visited. I asked for the security footage, but they said they couldn't share it. Not without a court order. I smiled, thanked her, and left. But I knew now, he'd been preparing. Funding their new life like some twisted honeymoon. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same mug Lila used every morning, the blue one with the chipped handle. I placed it in the center, then set Derek's ring inside it. One betrayal cradled by another. I whispered to the empty house, "You think you're in love. You think you've won. But you've underestimated me." And they had. They thought the mother they left behind would fade. But I was just getting started. 3 days after they vanished, I stopped grieving. Not because I was healed, but because I realized grief was a luxury they didn't deserve from me. I wasn't going to be the pitiful woman left behind. I was going to be the storm in their rearview mirror. The next morning, I dressed carefully, no makeup, no jewelry, just a beige sweater and old jeans. I needed to disappear, to become invisible. I packed a small notebook, Derek's printed emails, and the old photo of them at the lake. Then I drove to that other bank branch, the one where he'd made those large cash withdrawals. It was a 45-minute drive outside town, in a strip mall near a gas station and a motel. Something about that motel tugged at me, so I pulled into the lot, pretending I was just a tired traveler. The man behind the front desk looked half asleep, eating a sandwich with mustard smeared across his chin. "Help you?" he asked, bored. I pulled out a photo, not the lake one, but an old one from our vacation last year. Derek in a red polo, smiling fake for the camera. "Have you seen this man? He may have stayed here recently." The clerk blinked, squinted. Then, just like that, his eyes lit up. "Yeah. Yeah, he was here. Checked in with a younger woman. Blonde, tall. They used cash. Stayed in room 6, I think. Left in a hurry. Didn't even grab breakfast." My throat tightened. It was real. All of it. "When was this?" I asked. "Maybe 3 days ago? They left early morning, like around 6. She was laughing. He was carrying her shoes. I thanked him and stepped outside, the wind biting at my face. That was the morning I found the notes on my kitchen table. They had stayed the night here, barely an hour away, before beginning their new life. Cowards. Afraid to look me in the eye. I walked over to room 6. The door was closed. Cleaned. Empty now. But I stood there for a long time, memorizing it. So this was where they celebrated their first night of freedom, at a dingy roadside motel with peeling paint and the stench of stale cigarettes. Not exactly a fairy tale. But maybe that was fitting. Because no matter how they dressed it up, what they did was still rotten. Back in my car, I opened my notebook and began writing. Room 6. Cash. Blonde. Early morning, 3 days ago. I also took a photo of the clerk, he might be useful later. I wasn't just going to expose them to friends or neighbors. I wanted more. I wanted to destroy the little fantasy world they'd built. Brick by brick. And the best way to do that was from the inside. I knew Derek. I knew how he thought. He wasn't creative, not really. He was practical, predictable. He'd take her somewhere cheap, quiet, but with access to big cities and no prying eyes. He liked warm weather. Florida. Maybe the Carolinas. But he was also arrogant. And that arrogance would be his downfall. I started tracking listings on rental websites, searching for newly rented properties under fake names but paid in cash. I messaged property managers pretending to be a distant cousin, trying to reconnect with my family members who had gone off-grid. Most didn't reply. But one did. It was a woman named Debbie, who managed vacation homes near Savannah. "Yes," she wrote, "a man matching that description is renting one of our properties month to month. Keeps to himself, polite, has a young lady with him who rarely speaks." I assumed she was his daughter. I stared at that line for a long, long time. His daughter. If only Debbie knew the truth. If only the world did. That evening, I sat by my fireplace with a glass of wine I didn't taste, and stared into the flames, thinking, how many women do this? How many women sit quietly after betrayal, nursing wounds alone, never seeking justice? Too many. But I wasn't one of them. My daughter and my husband were building a house on bones, and I was going to rip the floor out from underneath them. Because love might have made me blind once, but revenge would make me see everything. The first time I dialed the number, I couldn't breathe. My hands were slick with sweat, and my thumb hovered over the green button like it might explode. It was a burner phone. I'd bought it that morning, cash only, from a convenience store where no one looked you in the eye. I used a voice changer app. Just in case. Because if Derek or Lila heard me, they'd run. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I called the property manager in Savannah again, Debbie. This time, I pretended to be a potential renter looking for something close to a relative who recently moved in. I asked for the address of the man she'd mentioned. She hesitated, said she couldn't give it out. But then I dangled the bait, I'm planning a surprise visit. He won't mind, I helped raise his daughter. She softened, probably thinking I was some sweet aunt. I'm not supposed to, she whispered, but if you're family, and just like that, she gave me the address. A 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of a quiet beach. Perfect for secrets. Perfect for lovers who wanted to disappear. I didn't go right away. I needed a plan, not just rage. I sat at my desk and reopened the red folder, my vault of betrayal. I added the address. I printed Debbie's emails. And then I opened a second folder. I labeled it exposure. Because this wasn't just about hurting them anymore. It was about showing the world who they were. I began piecing together a story. One that would look innocent at first glance, but carried the weight of everything they'd done. Photos of Derek and Lila together. Screenshots of their emails. My wedding photos, Lila's childhood pictures, notes she wrote me on Mother's Day. Every single artifact that would twist the knife when revealed. But I didn't just want evidence. I wanted presence. So I began designing something else, my return. Not to them, no. To the world. I'd spent my life being quiet. Reliable. Stable Marla, they called me at church. The calm one. But calm women can be deadly when betrayed. I pulled out the black dress I hadn't worn in years, silk, elegant, sharp at the waist. I had worn it the last time Derek and I went to a gala, back when I still believed in us. That dress made people stop and stare. It made him proud to hold my hand. I would wear it again, but this time it would be armor. I booked a flight to Savannah. No return date. I left a note for my neighbor, told her I was visiting relatives, asked her to water my plants. She smiled and waved me off, never guessing that inside my suitcase wasn't just clothes, but truth, sharpened like a blade. On the plane, I sat by the window, staring at the clouds and imagining what they would look like when I confronted them. Would Lila cry? Would Derek grovel? Or would they both laugh, thinking I was pathetic for chasing them? But here's the thing they forgot: I raised Lila. I taught her how to walk, how to lie, how to apologize. And I had been married to Derek for 22 years. I knew every twitch in his jaw, every way his guilt showed up. They could hide from strangers. But not from me. When I landed, I didn't go straight to the house. I checked into a nearby hotel, one with a balcony overlooking the water. I sat there at dusk, watching the same ocean that now cradled their betrayal. I could almost see them, walking barefoot in the sand, playing house, pretending they were something romantic instead of something grotesque. I whispered to the wind, "You think this is your beginning? But it's your countdown." The next morning, I stood outside their cottage. I didn't knock. I didn't scream. I just watched. Derek came out first. His beard was longer. He looked thinner, restless. Then Lila followed, wearing one of my old scarves. My scarf. Wrapped around her like a trophy. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I took a photo from my car, printed it at a local pharmacy, and slipped it into my folder that night with a note underneath, "Wearing her mother's life." This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. And I was going to make them pay in full. I didn't need to scream at her to make her hear me. I knew Lila better than she thought I did. She might have grown into a woman with her own life, her own mind, but underneath that hardened shell was still my daughter. Still the girl who used to cry when her goldfish died, who used to write me letters on sticky notes and tape them to the fridge when she got in trouble. So, I left her a letter. No threats. No curses. Just a slow-burning match in her mailbox. I wrote it by hand. One page. No signature. No address. I didn't want her to see it as her mother's words, but as truth staring her in the face. I wrote. You thought no one saw. You thought no one knew. But secrets never stay buried in sand. Especially not when they're sleeping in a bed that once belonged to a family. You're not his fantasy. You're his mistake in slow motion. And you're already unraveling, you just haven't felt the burn yet. I know where you are. And soon, they all will too. I folded it carefully and tucked it into an unmarked envelope. Just before dawn, I drove past their little beach cottage. No lights on. Quiet. Pretending to be peace. I parked down the street, walked barefoot in the sand, and slid the letter into their mailbox. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I was calm. Colder than the sea air. I didn't need confrontation, I needed corrosion. Quiet erosion from the inside out. That afternoon, I sat at the cafe across from the street, hidden behind sunglasses and a copy of a local magazine. I saw her. She stepped out in shorts and Derek's t-shirt, my old t-shirt. Her hair was unbrushed, her eyes still puffy with sleep. She walked to the mailbox, humming. But when she pulled the envelope out and read the letter, her smile cracked. Her fingers gripped the page. Her face strained. And then she dropped it. Right there on the ground. She looked around. Nervous. Paranoid. Beautiful. She knew I was close. Later that day, I started receiving calls I didn't recognize. Anonymous numbers. One left a voicemail. Derek's voice. Marla, please don't do this. Let us go. It's over. I replayed it 4 times. Not once did he say sorry. Not once did he say her name. Coward. His voice used to soothe me. Now it sounded like rust scraping metal. But I wasn't done. I reached out to a journalist. Not a big outlet, just a local woman who ran a podcast called Shadows of Home, focused on domestic betrayals and scandals that never make the news. I sent her a file, redacted names, partial emails, blurred photos. I told her it was real. That I had more. She replied within the hour, "This story will go viral. Are you ready for what comes next?" I typed back, "Yes." But they're not. By nightfall, I had uploaded a video, voice distorted, face hidden, story summarized in 4 minutes flat. He raised her. Then ran away with her. But the woman they left behind is the one holding the match. I didn't expect it to blow up. But by morning, the view count was already climbing. People were commenting. Guessing. Judging. Some said it had to be fake. Others called it brave. One woman wrote, "This happened to my cousin. Her stepfather left with her half-sister. No one ever talks about it." Another said, "Post the names. We deserve to know." And that's when I knew, the world was hungry for truth. And I was ready to feed it. Because when you steal a mother's love, a wife's loyalty, you don't just run away clean. You leave footprints. And I was following every single one. It was a Saturday evening, the kind that smelled like salt and jasmine, the kind made for lovers and lies. I had been watching them for days, never too close, never too far. Just enough to see the cracks. They didn't hold hands in public. They never went out together. He walked 3 paces ahead. She kept her head down. There was no honeymoon glow, no infatuation. Just secrecy stitched tight across their mouths. That night, though, they tried to play pretend. They dressed up. I saw them through the window of a little seafood restaurant near the docks, cheap wine, dim lighting, and music playing softly in the background. And then, they danced. It wasn't graceful. Derek was stiff. Lila looked uncomfortable, her eyes scanning the room even as she forced a smile. But still, they swayed together, 2 ghosts in love with their own delusion. I sat in my car across the street, headlights off, engine humming low. I couldn't hear the music, but I imagined it. Maybe something classic, something I once loved. I wanted to look away. But I didn't. I watched them move and sink, and I felt something colder than grief spread through my chest, pity. Because I finally saw it. Lila wasn't in love. Not truly. She looked tired. Her eyes weren't lit with joy. They were clouded with something else, confusion, maybe shame. And Derek, he was trying too hard. Too many smiles. Too many forced touches. This wasn't romance. It was rehearsal. A performance for no one but themselves. And that's when I knew, I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to expose them yet. I just needed to let the rot do its work. Because it was already eating them alive. Back at the hotel, I poured a glass of wine and opened my notebook again. This time, I didn't write about revenge. I wrote about memory. I wrote about Lila at 6, dancing in the living room in her pink socks. I wrote about the time Derek drove an hour just to bring me soup when I had the flu. I wrote about all the small, beautiful moments they had turned to ash. And then I lit the page on fire and dropped it into the hotel ashtray. Some things weren't worth remembering anymore. But I kept watching. I returned to the cafe across the street the next morning and saw them fight. Lila came out slamming the door behind her, barefoot, yelling something I couldn't hear. Derek followed, red-faced, trying to grab her arm. She pulled away. That was the moment I smiled, just slightly. Cracks becoming fractures. I started leaving more notes. Just one sentence each. Slipped under the door at night, or left in the mailbox again. Things like, the ocean doesn't hide bodies. It spits them back. You can't wash betrayal off your skin. He lied to you, too. He always has. Each note was signed with a tiny symbol, 3 dots in the shape of a triangle. Lila would remember. It was something I used to doodle in her lunchbox notes when she was a child. My little signature. My mark of love. Now it was a warning. One morning, I saw her standing by the water, alone, holding one of the notes in her hand. She looked around, panicked. Then she crumpled it, shoved it in her pocket, and walked back without a word to Derek. She didn't tell him. She was scared. And that fear? It was mine to use. The story I sent the podcaster was spreading. People were speculating online. Some guessed names. Some claimed to know the town. A few blogs picked it up. Headlines like, "Stepfather and stepdaughter vanish together, wife left behind tells her side." They didn't name me. Yet. But it was only a matter of time. And I wasn't hiding. I was just waiting for the final blow. The one they wouldn't see coming. Because sometimes, the worst revenge isn't loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper. A slow unraveling. A dance you let them perform, until the floor beneath them collapses. It was almost poetic, how the smallest, most intimate betrayals come wrapped in cloth and ink. I wasn't expecting to find anything personal, certainly not in the trash. But that's where it was, beneath a heap of pizza boxes and used paper towels, at the edge of the dumpster behind their rented cottage. A soft blue notebook, spiral-bound, with tiny sunflowers painted on the corners. Lila's journal. It must have slipped out with their garbage, maybe thrown out by accident. I had been waiting in my car, pretending to scroll through my phone, when I saw her toss a bag into the dumpster. And then walk away, fast, like she was embarrassed. Curiosity and habit made me check. And there it was. No lock, no password, just words, raw and exposed. I shouldn't have read it. But I did. Of course I did. The first few pages were innocent, grocery lists, job applications she never sent, affirmations scribbled with a shaky pen, "You're not a monster. You're just misunderstood." But the deeper I went, the heavier the words became. March 12th, sometimes I wake up and forget where I am. Then I see him. And I remember. This isn't a dream. I did this. I followed him. I don't even know who I am anymore. April 2nd, I miss Mom. I miss the way she used to braid my hair even when I was too old for it. I wonder if she's sleeping. If she's eating. I wonder if she hates me now. She should. April 15th, Derek's mood is changing. He doesn't talk much. He's distant. I think he regrets it. Or maybe he's just tired of pretending. He looks at me like I'm something broken. And maybe I am. I stopped reading for a moment, heart pounding. My daughter, this girl I had raised and protected, was unraveling. She wasn't glowing in love. She was drowning in guilt. And Derek, he was already slipping away from her, just like I knew he would. I flipped further, and there it was, the most important line of all, April 27th, I think he still loves her. He watches old videos of them on his phone when he thinks I'm asleep. He calls me Marla in his sleep sometimes. He doesn't know I hear it. But I do. I froze. He called her me. In his sleep. Still haunted by my name even as he held someone else. My mouth went dry. Because in that moment, I didn't just have heartbreak, I had proof. Proof that their fantasy was cracking. That their guilt was real. That love built on betrayal was already rotting from the inside. I photocopied the pages. I scanned them and uploaded them anonymously to the journalist who was now desperately chasing the full story. Her email simply read, "Holy hell. This changes everything. Are you ready to go public?" "Not yet," I told her. "Not until I say so." I returned the journal, left it at their doorstep in a brown paper bag with no note. I wanted her to feel it. To wonder how much I'd read. To fear how much I knew. That night, I saw her pacing outside the cottage with the journal clutched in her arms like a broken child's toy. She looked around in every direction, as if the truth itself was hiding in the trees. And in a way, it was. Watching. Waiting. I didn't pity her anymore. Not the way I used to. Because sorrow and shame are only tragic until they become weapons. And she had made her choice. She had laid down beside the man who used to kiss her mother's forehead in church. She had watched me cry and said nothing. She deserved every storm coming her way. But Derek? Derek was still sleeping soundly. Still thinking he'd gotten away clean. That would change soon. Because next, I was going to speak to the one person he thought I'd never reach, his first ex-wife. Yes. There had been another. One he never let me talk to. One he said was too crazy to trust. But now, I was ready to find her. Because the past doesn't stay buried. And neither would Derek. Not this time. Her name was Catherine Ellis, Derek's first wife. I'd only heard her name twice in the 2 decades I'd spent with him, always followed by some insult, unstable, jealous, manipulative. He claimed she cheated on him. He claimed she made his life hell. And like a fool, I believed him. I never questioned why he refused to let me meet her, or why there were no wedding photos, no legal papers lying around. But now, I needed her. Because if anyone had been burned by Derek before me, it was her. It took 2 hours and 3 burner accounts to track her down. She wasn't on social media under her married name, but a quick look through property records showed a Catherine Ellis living 3 states away in a small yellow house near a community library. I sent a letter. A real one. Handwritten. No return address. Just a question, did he lie to you, too? If so, call this number. I have a story to tell, and maybe you do too. She called 3 days later. Her voice was hoarse. Guarded. Is this some kind of joke? She asked. Are you one of his lawyers? No, I said. I'm his wife. Silence. A pause so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, quietly, she asked, current or former? Technically current, I replied. Though he ran off with my daughter, so I suppose that's up for debate. Another pause. Then a dry, bitter laugh. Oh, my God. He did it again. We spoke for 2 hours that night. Catherine told me things I wish I could unhear. How Derek had gaslit her, isolated her from her family, drained her bank account in the name of starting over, and then disappeared one night with her friend from work, leaving only a note and a stack of unpaid bills. He told me I was crazy, she said. That I was imagining things. That I was too emotional. And when I cried, he said I was being manipulative. I closed my eyes as she spoke, the words cutting like knives. Because I had heard those same things. He hadn't changed. He had just found another audience. First her. Then me. Now Lila. I warned people, Catherine said. No one listened. They thought I was bitter. But he leaves wreckage, Marla. That's what he does. He finds broken pieces of people and convinces them he's the glue. But he's not glue. He's gasoline. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was sad, but because I was furious. He had done this before. He had perfected it. And now, he had taken my daughter with him. Another soul to break. Another woman to bury. But now I had something he didn't expect, an ally. Catherine agreed to send me everything, old texts, voicemails, even a restraining order she once filed but dropped when he threatened to ruin her credit. She wanted him exposed as much as I did. Maybe more. And that's when the plan sharpened. I wasn't just going to humiliate him. I was going to document him. The blog post went live the next morning. Catherine's story. Labeled as fiction. But readers knew. Women knew. And then the podcast followed, our voices scrambled, our names protected, but the pattern undeniable. Derek Henley was becoming a shadow people recognized. The emails poured in. I dated him once. He conned my cousin. He stole from our clinic. Dozens of stories. Different states. Different names. Same man. Lila still didn't know. She still believed she had stolen someone sacred. But all she had taken was a ghost. A charming, well-dressed ghost with a long trail of victims and a soul made of ice. I stood outside their cottage that night, watching the lights flicker in the window. I wondered if he was holding her. Whispering lies. Promising forever. I smiled. Because forever was ending soon. It was subtle, almost innocent. A small cardboard box, no markings, no return address. Left on the front porch of their little seaside rental on a Tuesday morning, tucked between the welcome mat and a pair of damp sandals. I watched from my parked car 2 houses down, sipping coffee I no longer tasted. Lila was the one who opened the door. Her hair was unbrushed, her robe slipping from one shoulder. She picked up the box like it might be nothing, junk mail, forgotten groceries, maybe a mistake. But the moment she opened it, everything changed. I saw her flinch. Saw the color drain from her face. She staggered backward and dropped the box. Its contents spilled across the porch like scattered petals, except there was nothing soft about what was inside. Photocopies of Catherine's restraining order. A list of fake business names Derek had registered over the years. A screenshot of the podcast episode, with the line, "He doesn't love you. He collects you." And on top of the pile, a photo of Derek holding Lila on the beach, next to an old photo of him holding Catherine in the same exact pose, 20 years ago. The same arm. The same smile. The same lie, recycled. I watched Lila collapse to her knees, clawing the papers together as if she could shove them back into the box and undo the truth. Derek rushed out seconds later, shirtless, annoyed, yelling her name. But she didn't answer. She just stared up at him, tears spilling down her cheeks, clutching the photo like it had stabbed her. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. What I felt was justice beginning to breathe. Inside my own hotel room, the red folder was thicker now. I had mapped out every step of his history, his aliases, his lies, the women he used and left. It was all there. Names, dates, receipts. And now, finally, it was time for Lila to begin doubting the man she gave up her mother for. I needed her to see him not as a lover, not as a savior, but as a virus. The kind that infects slowly, and destroys from within. That night, Lila didn't come out. Derek did. Alone. He stood outside the house smoking, pacing, his phone in one hand, shouting into it with the kind of rage that made me wonder if he already suspected who was behind the packages. But he couldn't prove it. I hadn't left fingerprints. I'd worn gloves, mailed from drop boxes, used decoys, and dead-end email addresses. The next morning, I saw something I didn't expect: Lila leaving the house alone. No wave, no kiss, no goodbye. She got into their rental car and drove off. And Derek didn't follow. She was unraveling. I tracked her to the local library, of all places. She sat in the back corner, hoodie up, reading something on the public computer. I didn't even need to ask what. I already knew. She was listening to the podcast. Reading the blog. Comparing the words with the man she now lay beside. And then she did something that made my chest tighten, something that almost broke me. She pulled out a small pink leather notebook. Her journal. She opened to a blank page and began writing. Fast. Messy. Then stopped, stared at what she'd written, tore out the page, and left it behind on the desk when she left. I waited until she was gone. Then I walked in, picked up the paper like it was holy. 4 words. I think he groomed me. I sat down in that chair and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Lila was finally seeing it. Not just the betrayal, but the manipulation. He hadn't stolen her with love. He'd shaped her with lies. It was almost time to reveal everything. Not just to her, but to the world. Because one more package was coming. The last one. And it would carry the thing that would burn Derek's entire life to the ground. It was heavier than the others. Larger, more carefully wrapped. I mailed it from 3 towns away, wearing a wig and dark glasses, using gloves to seal the box. I addressed it to Derek directly, no Mr. or Sir. Just his name, sharp and bold on the label like a slap across the face. Inside was everything he thought he'd buried: his old marriage certificate with Catherine, the one he claimed had been destroyed in a fire. A printed transcript of the podcast episode, highlighted in yellow wherever the words manipulation, control, and emotional grooming appeared. I added Catherine's handwritten letter, raw, detailed, damning. But the final blow? That came in the form of a USB drive. It held one file, a video. Just audio and a black screen. But the voice on it was unmistakable, Lila's. I had recorded her journal entry, the one I found in the library. I read it in a cold, emotionless tone. I think he groomed me. That line repeated 3 times, the background silent. Then I closed it with my voice, unfiltered, quiet, and final. You broke us both. But now, we'll be the ones who bury you. He received the package in the morning. I didn't have to be there to watch it. The neighbor's Ring camera, yes, I had found a way to tap into it, caught the whole thing. He opened the box on the porch. Took out the contents slowly. I watched him freeze. His face didn't twist into rage. It crumpled. Like something inside him snapped. For the first time I saw fear. Not shame. Not regret. But real, full-bodied fear. He shoved everything back inside the box and stormed inside the house. 10 minutes later, Lila came running out the front door. She was crying. She didn't have shoes on. She clutched her phone like a lifeline. She got in the car and drove off again. This time, I didn't follow her. Because she wasn't the target anymore. She was collateral. She was cracking, and that was enough, for now. That night, I checked my email. Catherine had written again. Subject: he called me. Message: he begged me not to post anything else. Said he'd sue. Said it wasn't true. I told him to burn in hell. You were right, he's a coward when the mask falls. I sat back in my hotel chair, lit a candle, and stared into the flame. I could hear the ocean beyond the balcony. It didn't soothe me, not yet. But I was close. So close. Online, the story was spreading faster than I expected. One anonymous blog had picked it up and run a full piece: the stepdaughter, the husband, and the wife who refused to disappear. Comments exploded. Some angry. Some sympathetic. But the overwhelming tone was clear: this wasn't just betrayal. It was predation. And people were finally seeing it. I closed my laptop. Poured a glass of wine. Then picked up my phone and dialed the last person I thought I'd ever call. Lila. She didn't answer. Not right away. But 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text. From Lila, is it you? I typed back one word. Yes. There was a pause. Then came the reply that made my throat tighten. I need to talk. Alone. She wasn't asking to come home. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for truth. And I was ready to give it to her. But not all at once. Because this was still a war. And the final blow was still coming. She chose the old pier near the edge of town: half-rotted boards, rusted nails, seagulls screaming overhead. I don't know if she picked it for privacy or poetry, but it was the kind of place where people went to either cry or disappear. I arrived early. Dressed in gray. No makeup. Just myself, raw and grieving. When I saw her walking toward me, shoulders hunched and hair whipping in the wind, I swear time stopped. My daughter. My little girl. The same eyes I once kissed goodnight now looked at me like they belonged to someone else. She didn't say a word at first. Just stood there, trembling. Then finally, why didn't you come for me sooner? I blinked. You didn't want to be found. She shook her head slowly. No. I didn't want to believe I needed saving. We stood in silence, the sea raging below us. And then she sat, legs dangling off the edge like she used to when she was 10. Did you send the packages? She asked quietly. Yes, I said. All of them. She didn't flinch. Good. I turned toward her, but she kept her eyes on the waves. Lila, why? Her shoulders rose, then dropped like she was emptying a secret from her lungs. He made me feel seen. Like I mattered. After college, after Dad left, after the depression, I was just floating. And Derek, he paid attention. He listened. He told me you were too busy, too critical, too cold. She turned to me then, eyes glistening. I believed him. And when he kissed me, I thought it meant I was finally lovable. I gripped the edge of the pier. My knuckles went white. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I just whispered, you were always lovable. You didn't need to be touched to be seen. I know that now, she said. I know it because every time he touches me now, I feel like I'm drowning. He doesn't look at me the same. He's angry. Distant. I think he only loved me when I was yours. That line broke something in me. She reached into her coat pocket and handed me something. A flash drive. He's been recording phone calls. Catherine's, yours, even his lawyer. He keeps them on his laptop. I copied them. There's more stuff. About other women. Fraud. Scams. It's all there. I took it slowly. Why are you giving this to me? Because I don't want to be him. I don't want to be you, either, not broken, not bitter. I want to be clean. Free. We sat in silence. The ocean below us didn't care about our pain. It just kept moving. Lila spoke again, barely audible. I'm sorry, Mom. And for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not from betrayal. But from the sudden, aching relief of hearing those words. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said. But I'm not ready to lose you forever, either. She nodded. I understand. When we finally stood, we didn't hug. We didn't hold hands. But there was a space between us that felt less like a wound and more like a bridge under construction. She walked away. Slowly. Back to that poisoned cottage. But in my hand was the final weapon. The flash drive. The proof. And now, I wasn't just a woman betrayed. I was a witness. And soon, I'd become their reckoning. The moment I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, I knew there was no turning back. This wasn't just a quiet war anymore, this was evidence. Cold, unflinching, damning. The folder Lila had labeled for her opened into a symphony of rot, audio files, screenshots, scanned documents, and a spreadsheet with names I didn't recognize. Dozens of them. Women. All of them marked with notes: loan, affair, ghosted, threatened. A digital graveyard of Derek's conquests and victims. I listened to the recordings first. His voice was so calm, so calculated. One file was a conversation with Catherine from just weeks ago, where he laughed as he told her, "No one's going to believe you. You're old news. I've got someone new now, someone who listens." Another file held a call with a financial advisor. Derek instructing him to move money from our joint account into a shell corporation, one I never even knew existed. The man was building an empire of fraud while I folded laundry and kissed him goodnight. But the final recording was the one that nearly stopped my heart. It was Lila. Crying. "You said we were safe," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You said you loved me." And then Derek's voice, so cold it chilled the room. "I loved what you gave me. That's different." I sat back in my chair, fists clenched, pulse racing. There it was. The truth. Not just about what he'd done to me. Or Catherine. Or the women before us. But what he had done to Lila. He hadn't run away for love. He had run away for power. Control. He had used my daughter as a mirror to admire himself in. And now, I had every tool to burn his world down. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I went to the journalist first, the same one who published Catherine's story. I met her in a diner just outside Savannah, sliding the flash drive across the table like a bomb. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the contents. "Do you want to stay anonymous?" she asked, her voice low. I shook my head. "Not anymore." She nodded slowly. "This story won't just go viral. It'll detonate." "Good," I said. "Let it." I returned to the hotel and packed my bags. I didn't need to be here anymore. My work was almost done. But before I left town, I made one final stop, outside the cottage. I didn't go to the door. I didn't want to see his face. I just stood across the street and watched. Lila appeared in the window, pale and still. She saw me. For a moment, we just stared. Then, slowly, she raised her hand, and waved. It wasn't joy. It wasn't goodbye. It was acknowledgement. I drove away without looking back. The article went live 3 days later. The man who groomed his stepdaughter, and left a trail of victims. Names. Evidence. Voices. It was all there. By the end of the week, Derek's accounts were frozen. 2 lawsuits were filed. One woman came forward on live TV. And Lila? She disappeared from the cottage. No one knew where she went. I only hoped she was somewhere safe, starting over without him. I wasn't finished yet. I still had things to rebuild. Scars to face. But for the first time in months, I felt clean. He had taken my marriage. He had taken my daughter. He had taken my name and twisted it in his mouth like it was disposable. But now, he had nothing left. The reckoning had begun. And it was only the start. The morning he was arrested, I was planting marigolds in my front garden, the same garden Derek used to mock, saying flowers were a waste of time. I remember the way the soil crumbled under my fingertips, rich and dark, the way I used to teach Lila when she was little. And then my phone buzzed. A message from the journalist. Just one line, "It's happening." I stood slowly, wiping my hands on my apron, and opened the link she sent. The video was grainy but real. A news crew had caught it live. Derek being led out of the Savannah cottage in handcuffs, his head down, jaw clenched. No tears. No protests. Just that same empty calm he used whenever he knew he'd been cornered. Lila was nowhere in sight. Maybe she was already gone. Maybe she was the one who tipped them off. I hoped so. The charges came pouring in: fraud, identity theft, coercion. One woman claimed he had convinced her to take out a $40,000 loan under the promise of starting a charity. Another said he moved into her home, drained her savings, then vanished. It was a tidal wave of victims, all whispering the same name, Derek Henley. I couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear. From release. 23 years I had given him. I built his home. Raised his stepchild. Defended him against rumors I now knew were truths. And all this time, he had been sharpening the knife behind my back. But now, the world knew. I received an email from one of the victims that night. A woman named Gina from Illinois. She wrote, "I saw your name in the article. I remember you from Facebook photos years ago. He used to show me pictures of your garden, said it was his piece. I didn't know he was married. I'm so sorry. I hope you're okay." I'm finally starting to be. Her words made me cry harder than anything else had. Because I wasn't just a victim. I was part of a chain of women he had used like stepping stones. And now, we were all breaking free. The next morning, my doorbell rang. It was Lila. Her hair was darker, chopped short. She wore a loose gray sweatshirt, no makeup. Her face looked thinner, older somehow, like a woman who had been forced to grow up too fast. She held out a small paper bag. "I brought you something," she said. Inside was my wedding ring. "I found it in his drawer," she said. "I think he kept it to remind himself he could always get away with it." I thought, "You should be the one to decide where it goes." I nodded. Took the ring without a word. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't linger. She just stood on the porch and waited. And then, after a long silence, she said, "I'm going to testify. Against him. I want to help the others." "Are you ready for that?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "But I'm doing it anyway." And just like that, she left. I stood in the doorway for a long time after, holding the ring, watching her walk away, not as the girl who betrayed me, but as the woman trying to put herself back together. Just like me. That night, I melted the ring. Dropped it into a small crucible I borrowed from an artist friend. Watched it turn into a golden puddle. I didn't keep it. I didn't repurpose it. I let it cool, cracked it with a hammer, and scattered the fragments into the sea. That chapter of my life was over. But the trial hadn't begun. And soon, Derek would stand in front of a courtroom full of women holding pieces of the same story. And this time I'd be the one watching. Ready to see him fall. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with whispers, cameras clicking from the press bench, and the dull hum of fluorescent lights. But beneath the noise, there was a kind of stillness in the air. The kind you feel before a storm. I sat in the front row, spine straight, hands clasped tightly in my lap. Catherine was beside me, her fingers twitching. Gina, the woman from Illinois, 2 rows behind us. And scattered through the gallery were other women, women who didn't even know one another, but all wore the same expression, tired and ready. He entered in shackles. Derek Henley. No tie. Just a prison-issued beige shirt and a pair of hollow eyes that scanned the crowd. I watched him search for a friendly face, some ally who might save him. But all he saw were his ghosts. Women he'd once seduced, manipulated, or stolen from, now united by a truth too big to bury. He didn't see Lila. She was sitting in the witness room, waiting for her turn. I had seen her that morning, pale but calm, a faint scar on her lip from biting it too hard during sleep, she said. She wore no makeup, no dramatics. Just a blue blouse and a silver necklace I once gave her on her 16th birthday. She had told me she didn't want to be seen as a victim. She wanted to be a witness. And when her name was called, the courtroom fell silent. She walked with steady steps to the stand, looked the judge in the eye, and when asked if she understood what it meant to testify, she nodded and whispered, "Yes. I do." And then, she told everything. The grooming. The slow shift from comfort to confusion. The night he first touched her and how he made her believe it was love, not theft. The way he used me, her mother, as the measuring stick of her worth. The lies. The manipulation. The moments she realized that she had never been his partner. Only his prey. She didn't cry. Not once. But when she was done, the courtroom did. Even the clerk had tears in her eyes. I felt my own chest rise and fall like I was exhaling for the first time in months. The defense tried to twist her words. Asked if she was angry with me. If this was all a vendetta. But Lila held firm. I didn't come here because of my mother, she said. I came here because of what he did to me. And to all of us. When she stepped down, she looked straight at Derek. He looked away. The judge called a recess. We gathered outside on the courthouse steps, sunlight streaming down on our faces like some final act of mercy. Lila walked up beside me, no words, just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, as if we had never broken. I don't know what happens next, she said softly. We keep telling the truth, I replied. Until there's nothing left for him to hide behind. That night, the media exploded. Headlines read, "Stepdaughter testifies against stepfather in grooming and fraud case. Pattern of abuse unfolds in shocking trial. Women across states unite against serial manipulator." Our faces weren't shown. But our stories were. The story of how a man used charm like a blade. How he turned daughters into lovers. And wives into shadows. But not anymore. Because now, we were the light. And Derek was finally drowning in the darkness he created. It came in a plain envelope with no return address, the kind of thing you might toss out with junk mail if your gut didn't scream otherwise. The handwriting on the front was familiar, slanted, neat, rehearsed. Derek. I stared at it on my kitchen table for a long time, afraid to open it, afraid not to. Eventually, I slipped a knife under the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. It wasn't an apology. It was a performance. Marla, I suppose you're proud. You've done what all angry women dream of, set fire to a man and called it justice. I won't beg. I won't explain. You've always needed villains, and I suppose I fit the part. But deep down, you know this wasn't all me. You ignored her. You smothered us both. You built the prison you now call betrayal. She came to me. Remember that. Enjoy the ashes. I folded it neatly and slid it back into the envelope. Then I dropped it into the sink and watched it drown under the faucet. No fire. No drama. Just water, washing away the last lie he tried to sell me. Because I knew the truth now. I didn't need his version. He could rewrite history from a cell. But the world had already read ours. Later that evening, I sat on the porch swing, the very one where he once kissed my knuckles after we signed our mortgage papers. The air was warm, the crickets singing, and for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Lila called. She was in Ohio now, staying with Catherine, yes, Catherine, the woman Derek once painted as dangerous. Funny how victims find each other when the masks fall. They were helping one of the newer women press charges, compiling timelines, building a civil case. Lila's voice sounded stronger. Tired, but sure. "Mom," she said, "you know he's never going to stop trying to twist the story, right?" "I know," I said. "But no one's listening to him anymore." She was quiet for a moment. then, can I come visit next week? My throat tightened. You're always welcome. But you don't have to rush. I want to, she whispered. I just want to sit with you. Not say anything. Just sit. I smiled through tears. We can do that. After we hung up, I pulled out the red folder one last time. It was thick now, bulging with documents, printouts, letters, screenshots, witness statements. I opened to the first page, his wedding vows. I had kept them all these years, thinking they meant something. And now, they would serve a better purpose. I burned them. One by one, I fed each page to the fire pit outside. Not in rage. Not even in sadness. But with clarity. I wasn't keeping his words anymore. I was keeping mine. I am not the woman you left. I am not the mother you tried to erase. I am not the story you thought you could rewrite. And tomorrow, I will testify. I will look him in the eye. And say everything he never wanted the world to hear. Because his silence used to be power. But now, mine is. The courtroom was colder that day. Maybe it was the rain outside, or maybe it was because the air shifted, like the walls themselves knew that something final was about to be spoken. I had avoided testifying for as long as I could. Not out of fear, but out of timing. I needed my voice to come last. After the victims. After Lila. After the parade of women who had looked into Derek's eyes and seen the devil wearing charm like a suit. Now, it was my turn to say the part only I could say, what it's like to love the man who breaks you and calls it care. I wore black. Not for him, but for the part of myself that had died under his roof. When my name was called, I walked forward slowly. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, Derek, and for the first time, he couldn't hold my gaze. He looked down like a man facing his tombstone. I raised my right hand. I swore to tell the truth. And then I did. I was married to Derek Henley for 23 years, I began, voice steady. He wasn't always a monster. That's how monsters work. They come wearing comfort. They say the right things, bring flowers, make promises. And you believe them, because you want to. Because the idea of being wrong about someone you've built your life around is too painful to face. I looked to the jury, 9 women, 3 men. Some leaned in. Some just blinked slowly, like they already knew where this was going. He lied to me. 4 years. About who he was. About where he came from. He kept me small with little comments. You used to be prettier, Marla. Don't embarrass me in front of the neighbors. You're lucky I'm still here. I thought it was just stress. Marriage. Life. But it wasn't. It was erasure. One layer at a time. I paused, swallowing. But what he did to my daughter, I turned toward Derek again. That's something I will never forgive. He flinched. She was vulnerable. Grieving. Insecure. And he wrapped himself around that like a snake. He didn't seduce her, he sculpted her. He turned her into what he wanted and called it love. Gasps echoed around the courtroom. But I didn't stop. Lila was a child to him once. And when he decided to destroy me, he did it the way he always had, with slow fire and soft words. And when he ran away with her, he didn't just leave me. He left the truth behind. I reached into my coat pocket and held up the journal page Lila had written, the one she tore out at the library. I think he groomed me. I let the line hang in the air like a bell. She wrote that. Not for lawyers. Not for attention. Just for herself. And that's how I know it's real. The judge nodded for me to continue, but I had nothing more to say. Nothing that hadn't already been proven. So I ended simply, I am not here to punish him. The law will do that. I'm here to tell you, this man is not who he pretends to be. He has lived many lives, worn many faces, hurt too many people. It ends here. Not because I say so, but because we say so. When I stepped down from the stand, the silence was deafening. And then the gallery erupted into applause. The judge called for order, but it didn't matter. Because something had shifted. Not just in that room, but in me. I had spoken. I had survived. And Eric? He had finally been seen. Not as a husband. Not as a lover. But as what he truly was. A predator who thought he could hide in plain sight. But now, the world had turned its lights on. The jury was out for 4 hours. 4 hours that felt like a lifetime strung taut with every second I breathed. I sat in the courthouse hallway with Catherine on one side and Lila on the other. 3 women, tied by blood, betrayal, and the same man who had tried to break us. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. There was nothing left to explain, no more pieces to gather. We had spoken our truths. Now it was up to the world to decide if it would believe them. When the bailiff finally stepped into the hallway and said, "They're ready," I felt everything inside me go still. Not fear. Not even hope. Just a strange, aching calm. Like the moment before thunder. The courtroom was packed again, reporters, victims, lawyers, the curious, the broken. And Derek sat where he had always sat, shackled, jaw tight, eyes narrowed not with shame, but with calculation. Even now, he was trying to read the room, trying to see how he could twist the next part into a story where he was the victim. But the power he once held had long since evaporated. Every eye in that room was waiting for justice, not for him, but for us. The judge returned. The jury filed in. The 4 women stood. In the case of the state versus Derek Allen Henley, on the charges of fraud, coercive control, and exploitation of a vulnerable adult, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. A gasp. A sob. A hand clasped mine, I think it was Lila's, though I couldn't move to check. The 4 women continued. On the charges of financial fraud across state lines, guilty. On the charges of grooming and psychological manipulation, guilty. Each word was a hammer, slamming down on every lie Derek had built his world upon. When the final verdict was read, the judge turned to Derek and spoke words I had waited years to hear. "Mr. Henley, you are hereby remanded to federal custody for a sentence of no less than 25 years, without the possibility of parole for the first 15. It was over. No deals. No loopholes. No charm left to buy his way out. Derek didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He just stared ahead, like he still couldn't believe that the curtain had finally been pulled back, and there was no one left to clap for him. I walked out of that courtroom into the blinding light of day, and for the first time in what felt like years, I stood tall. Not in victory, but in peace. Reporters shouted questions. People reached out to shake my hand. Some of the other women, Gina, Angela, Marta, came to hug me. I embraced them all. We were no longer stories in the shadows. We were survivors. We were sisters. Later that evening, Lila and I sat together in a small diner, quietly splitting a piece of lemon pie. "I thought it would feel different," she said. "How does it feel?" She took a breath. "Not finished. But possible." I nodded. "That's how healing starts. Not with fireworks. But with something small, like peace." We sat in silence again, the good kind this time. The kind that comes when the monster is gone. When your voice has been heard. When justice is not just an idea, but something real, and finally yours. 2 weeks after the verdict, I returned to the house Derek and I once shared, the one where the betrayal began. It had been sitting empty, the air stale, curtains drawn like the house itself was ashamed. I unlocked the door slowly, half expecting the walls to breathe, the shadows to whisper. But there was only dust and silence. The kind of silence that doesn't haunt, it mourns. I walked from room to room like a stranger. The kitchen, where he used to hum while slicing apples. The hallway where Lila once danced in her socks. The bedroom where I had waited for him night after night, convincing myself that distance in a marriage was normal. That indifference was just a phase. I stood by the closet, opened the door, and found one of his shirts still hanging. Blue flannel. Worn at the elbows. It still smelled faintly of him. I didn't cry. I simply pulled it off the hanger, folded it once, and dropped it in the donation bag. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Sometimes I burned the house down. Sometimes I sold it and left the state. Sometimes I just walked away. But now, standing here with light pouring through the windows and no ghosts left to chase, I realized the truth: I didn't have to destroy anything. The destruction had already happened, and I had survived it. Instead, I opened the windows. Let the wind rush in. The air shifted instantly, as if the house had been holding its breath all this time, waiting for me to let it go. I spent the day cleaning. Not because I wanted to stay, but because I wanted to say goodbye on my terms. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, threw out the sheets, took down the old photographs. But one picture I kept: Lila at 8 years old, missing her front teeth, holding a sunflower as tall as she was. I put it in my purse. Because some things are worth salvaging. That night, I lit a single candle in the living room and wrote a letter. Not to Derek. To myself. Dear Marla, you were never weak. You were never blind. You loved. And he used that against you. But you survived. You fought back. You found your voice. You found your daughter again. You are not the woman he left. You are the woman who stood when he fell. Burn this house in your memory if you must. But walk out of it with your heart intact. You are whole. Even with the cracks. Love, you. I folded the letter, placed it on the mantel, and turned off the light. I didn't lock the door behind me. I just closed it softly. Not out of sentiment, but because this chapter was over. I stayed with a friend that night. Catherine had offered, but I needed space. Lila texted me at midnight. Lila, I'm safe. I'm sleeping okay. I think I want to go back to school, maybe study social work. Help girls like me. My eyes welled. Me, you'd be perfect at it. Proud of you. She replied with a photo. A bracelet I'd given her as a child, thin silver with a tiny heart charm. She had cleaned it. Polished it. She was wearing it again. That was all I needed to know. The past was gone. The storm had passed. And in its place, we were growing something new. The last few months had been a whirlwind, but slowly, a new rhythm settled over our lives. Lila and I were rebuilding, not just a mother-daughter relationship, but our trust, our laughter, our shared history. We found a small apartment in town, cozy enough to hold our memories but fresh enough to hold our dreams. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the window, Lila sat across from me, flipping through a social work textbook she'd borrowed from the library. Her eyes sparkled, not with pain, but with purpose. I want to help others escape what I went through, she said softly. Maybe change things, even if just a little. I smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. You already have. Together, we began volunteering at a local support center, sharing our story carefully, knowing how important it was to give hope. Our voices, once silenced by betrayal and shame, now became beacons for women still trapped in shadows. Some days were hard. Memories lingered like ghosts. But we faced them side by side, stronger for the storms we survived. And then, one crisp evening, as we walked home from a community meeting, Lila stopped, looked up at the stars, and whispered, "Mom, do you think we're free?" I paused, thinking of everything we'd lost and gained. Free, I said, is choosing who we become despite the past. And right now? We're choosing hope. She smiled, leaning into my shoulder. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt ours. We had lost much, but we had reclaimed everything that mattered. Love. Strength. And each other. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. Where are you watching from? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. The courtroom battles are behind us now, but healing is never truly linear. Some days, the past feels like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. Other days, it lifts, revealing bright skies and possibilities I thought I'd lost forever. Lila and I have learned to navigate both, leaning on each other when the weight is too much, celebrating every small victory. I found a journal of my own, a simple leather-bound book, and began writing again. Not just the pain, but the moments of grace, the laughter, the hope. I wrote letters to the woman I was before betrayal, and to the woman I am becoming. We've opened our home to new friendships, community work, and quiet mornings filled with coffee and conversation. Lila started her classes in social work and already speaks with the passion and empathy of someone who's truly been through the fire and wants to guide others out of it. One afternoon, as the sunlight warmed the kitchen, Lila hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." And I whispered back, "Thank you for trusting me enough to come home." Our story isn't perfect, and the scars will never fully fade. But we found something more valuable: resilience, forgiveness, and a future built on truth. This is not the end. It is a new beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, betrayal, and ultimately, healing. If you found hope here today, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. Where are you watching from? I'd love to connect with you in the comments below.